We do ask that the audience not respond with clapping because we do have quite a number of folks here today, and we could easily consume quite a good part of our time with clapping after responses from any of the participants, regardless of which side you're on. So if you could refrain from that, we would appreciate that. Thank you.
I didn't mind it in this instance.
I understand. We still have a long way to go.
Yes, we do.
And we really shouldn't be interrupted by that regularly. So at any rate, thank you for your consideration of that. All right, Mr. Gillis, turn to you.
Turn to Mr. Showalter.
Chairman,
Okay.
Mr. Shields, this is Ryan Showalter
Yes.
again. I'm very happy to be here. We appreciate you taking the time to consider the text amendment. I'd like to briefly provide a little more background and introduce the members of our team who are going to speak to the text amendment generally, and then we'd be happy to walk through any aspects of the staff report and address any questions or concerns that the Planning Commission might have. First, I'd like to introduce Haley Lemieux. Again, Haley is the Director of Policy Development for the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development. Haley's a leading housing policy expert of the state of Maryland, and she's also appearing today as a representative of the state, which is an investor in the success of Salisbury's downtown through the Salisbury Town Center Apartment Project. As you know, the state of Maryland has provided generous grant support for the implementation of that project. After Haley, Sarah Miller, to my immediate left, will speak. Sarah's Vice President of Economic Development for Margrave Strategies. Like you, Sarah's at least a former Planning Commission member of a municipality in Maryland, has extensive experience in community and economic development, and she's going to speak to the importance of strong zoning foundations for successful downtowns. And then she will be followed by Owen Bailey, who's to my right. Again, Owen is the Director of Land Use and Policy for the Eastern Shore Land Conservancy. And Owen's going to speak to you about the importance of density for the success of both downtowns and land conservation. Before we turn to Haley, though, I'd like to make one important point that I think potentially can be lost, and that is to understand that this text amendment is really not about going from 40 to 80 units. Until recently, when the Circuit Court of Wicomico County invalidated a portion of the city's zoning structure, your zoning, your CBD zoning, allowed the Board of Appeals to grant additional density, up to 70 units per acre. So a special exception under Maryland law is a decision that was made legislatively by the City Council. It's a use that is presumptively valid. So up until that recent decision by the Circuit Court, you had zoning within the city that was by right 40 units to the acre with the presumptively valid right to get to 70 units per acre. So this is a change to make by right zoning for 80 units per acre, but it's really only a 10 unit per acre increase over the zoning structure that existed up until a couple of months ago. And with that, we turn to Haley.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, it's a genuine pleasure to be here today. I'm here to testify on behalf of the state of Maryland in support of the proposed zoning text amendment. Increasing residential density in central business districts is key to sustained economic growth in our core communities across the state, and it is key to addressing the housing affordability crisis that impacts so many families across our state. Our belief in the return on investment to Salisbury, Wicomico County, and the state of Maryland is reflected in our investment of competitive state funding to the mixed-use housing development projects that would be facilitated by this proposal. I am authorized to share today the recent news that this investment will now be doubled, totaling $1 million in state funds being awarded to the Salisbury Town Center Apartments. Increasing residential density in downtown Salisbury supports existing downtown businesses and existing city and county residents. Adding more homes to the central business district is demonstrated to support local small businesses that depend heavily on foot traffic, like retail stores, art galleries, bakeries, and restaurants. More foot traffic and market demand over time also attracts new businesses, which will fill vacant storefronts and give existing Wicomico County residents more retail, restaurant, and entertainment options. Not only will increasing residential density benefit local businesses, it will also help address the critical need for new housing supply in Wicomico County. Over 13,000 county residents struggle to afford their rent or mortgage payment each month, and that includes over half of all Wicomico County residents. Research has consistently demonstrated that increasing the supply of new housing, including market rate housing, is the most effective way to reduce housing costs in the long term. Housing markets in places as diverse as Minneapolis, Minnesota, Austin, Texas, Raleigh, North Carolina, and Orlando, Florida, have actually seen both population growth and new business investment coincide with market-wide decreases in rents due to increases in housing supply. This proposed zoning text amendment is in line with national best practices on changing local development codes to allow much needed new housing. I understand that the Planning and Zoning Commission is deeply considering what the impact of a proposed increase in allowable density will have on existing residents, surrounding neighborhoods, and essential infrastructure, especially the availability of parking, water capacity, and public school capacity. These are conversations that the state of Maryland has engaged in with jurisdictions across the state and are consistently the most common concerns that we do hear about new housing development. Other Maryland jurisdictions have approached these concerns in different ways. Many counties, especially our wealthiest and most economically advantaged urban counties, have used local ordinances to prevent housing development until road and school infrastructure is built out and able to service the proposed new housing development. However, without exception, we hear from these counties that this kind of planning process has been a meaningful constraint on their jurisdiction's tax base and long-term economic growth. And without exception, these counties have become our most expensive communities, over time pressing out people who work in those areas and who grew up in those areas. While counties on the other side of the bridge are not always informative comparisons, I do believe that communities across the state can learn from those mistakes to avoid repeating them. We also hear a lot from more rural and suburban counties in Maryland that are really struggling to attract new housing and business investment. In those counties, the local jurisdiction has to commit large amounts of county funds to build any new housing at all. The other week, we were in Allegheny County, and officials shared that they had to spend $3 million in county funds to attract a single market rate home builder to Cumberland. The planning approach that has worked best, both in Maryland and in other mid-sized municipalities across the country, has been a housing-first, mixed-use development approach that recognizes the value private sector investment in housing brings to the tax base of a local jurisdiction. While parking is important to central business districts, the creation of mixed-use housing development is essential. Not only will the proposed project facilitated by the zoning text amendment provide a net increase in the number of parking spaces located downtown, it will also bring new tax revenue to the city and county that can be used to fund future public infrastructure jurisdiction-wide, including new schools, new roads, and some of the other concerns discussed in the city staff report. The private sector investment that Salisbury has attracted downtown is a real testament to all of the assets in this community, and it's a real testament to the hard work and dedication of many of the people in this room. The vibrancy of the Salisbury Central Business District is something that many other jurisdictions in Maryland aspire to and are actively working towards. And it's something that the state sees real value in and returns on investment from. The proposed zoning text amendment supports Salisbury small businesses, it supports Wicomico County families, and it supports the state of Maryland's long-term economic future. I respectfully urge the Planning and Zoning Commission to approve the proposed increase in residential density. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I might have a question quickly, are people going to be able to ask individual witnesses questions or? No? Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Miller, and I'm representing Margrave Strategies, a consulting firm dedicated to making great places through planning, economic development, and real estate development. Professionally, my background includes over 2 decades of working with communities throughout Pennsylvania and Maryland that have reimagined themselves and positioned themselves for sustainable growth. Personally, I grew up in northeastern Ohio, which has grappled with economic instability, zoning, and land use challenges for generations. I also have served as a planning commissioner in my own community of Rockville, where my family lives today, and I'm here to support the zoning text amendment. Across the country, small and mid-sized communities have recentered their downtowns as the hub of residential, commercial, and cultural activities. We know that a healthy mixed-use downtown core lets residents, businesses, and visitors experience the community's best features, and that activated public realms beyond 9 to 5 benefit from lower crime rates and higher quality public services. Just because we increase residential density does not mean that we lose the charm in the places we love. In fact, more housing opportunities help many towns recreate a sense of place and quality of life that people desire. For example, in Lidditz, Pennsylvania, which is a charming town in Lancaster County, it has a higher population density than Kansas City, Missouri. in Erie, Pennsylvania, which is a national model for thoughtful downtown development. It is focused on multifamily residential as a pillar of its resurgence and has seen tens of millions of dollars in new commercial investments. Places like Ithaca, New York, Medina, Ohio, Burlington, Vermont, and other beloved places where downtown residential is the underpinning to a thriving community. In fact, in the case of Vermont, the state has gone even further and bolstered local high-density zoning with state incentives that encourage compact city centers. Studies from a wide variety of institutions, from the Federal Reserve of St. Louis to Congress for New Urbanism in D.C., show that people living downtown help to promote jobs. It stabilizes public resource allocation and promotes vibrancy, all good things from a public finance perspective. At the same time, we also have lessons learned in communities that were reluctant to approve the residential density necessary for their downtowns to thrive. In Rockville, for example, more than a decade after substantial investments in public infrastructure and commercial real estate were made, our storefronts are suffering from a lack of residential density, and the pandemic just exacerbated that challenge. The International Downtown Association's recent study showed that towns with higher residential density fared far better during the pandemic, and reiterated that as downtowns continue to grow their residential population, they will become more resilient and able to withstand economic, social, and environmental disruptions more easily. One final national note is from the Municipal Research and Services Center, which provides data analysis and technical assistance to cities and towns across Washington state. They uniformly recommend zoning and land use policies that allow the market to, quote, respond to contemporary housing demands by providing a range of multifamily housing types in downtown cores of all sizes. Now, having said all of this, and regardless of the national data and studies that I've cited, local development projections can be daunting. But zoning is just one tool in the process. Your design guidelines, market and economic forces, and community input are vital components of making great places. What we're asking you to do today is to support Salisbury's continued success by providing a modernized tool for the future. We're asking you to create a foundation that is flexible and accommodating, and one that supports Salisbury's evolution as its future unfolds. Thank you.
Thank you.
I suppose I'm up next. I would like to show a presentation to the commission that I was told I could look up. I do, yes.
Do you want to switch?
Chair. Do you want chair?
Thanks.
Yes or no? You got it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, my name is Owen Bailey. I'm the Director of Land Use and Policy for the Eastern Shore Land Conservancy, and we recently acquired land use data from the firm Urban3, which is a geospatial firm out of North Carolina that uses GIS to show land value data. So what is this? We got this data for 8 of the 9 counties on the Eastern Shore, including the city of Salisbury and Wicomico County. So this data shows a value per acre analysis. Now, what is value per acre? Currently, we look at developments the way that you might look at miles per tank in a car. You look at the entire development and you think about, and you calculate what is going to be the property tax revenues from that development as a whole. But this is sort of a backwards way to look at value. We don't look at miles per tank, we look at miles per gallon. So you can see here that Ford Lariat, which at one point was the highest, was higher on the scale with miles per tank, is now on the lower end. And the Prius and the Isetta are on the higher end. So this is looking at value per This is looking at value per acre for our communities on the Eastern Shore. What are our properties bringing in compared to the infrastructure that feeds them? Okay. Thank you. So here's our map for the Eastern Shore, and you'll see some spikes in each of our towns. These are not skyscrapers, this is value. And you can see the value is concentrated around our historic cores. Our historic districts, our urban cores, these are the most valuable, most profitable places that we have developed here on the Eastern Shore. And this map, Urban 3 has done studies throughout the United States and North America, and this is a typical map that you see. You can see spikes in Chestertown, Easton, Cambridge, and you can see a huge spike in Salisbury and Ocean City. These are your properties that are highly productive, that are helping you through their property tax revenues. Just to look at Talbot County, for instance, you see 3 spikes: Easton, St. Michael's, Oxford. Again, the most valuable properties that they have are in their downtown cores. These are properties that are built usually before 1950, before we started to build for cars instead of people. These are places, yes, they don't have a lot of parking lots, they don't have a lot of car infrastructure, but what they do have is human infrastructure. These are places for people, and they are highly productive and highly valuable. And in many cases, these types of places are illegal to replicate elsewhere in their communities. So let's look at what this means on a picture scale. So these are some single-family detached examples. You can see the image on the upper left. This is a very low density, a house with one of the largest setbacks I've ever seen, and it's averaged around $400,000 per acre. Again, this is the miles per gallon analysis. If you look in the lower left-hand corner, you can see that on average, Walmarts on the Eastern Shore bring in about $700,000 per acre. And then if you scale over to the more dense house on the right, you see that it is valued at $3.6 million per acre. Now going to single-family attached, you can see all of these begin to jump in their value, 1.2, 2.9, 3.4 million dollars for townhomes, bringing in much more productivity than single-family detached homes. And mind you, these are properties that are paying for the infrastructure, the water and sewer, the roads, the stormwater. The more value you have, the more property tax revenues you have coming into your community that help you pay for the maintenance of that infrastructure. And he says the missing middle, your townhomes, your 3-story multifamily, your duplexes, and you can see again the values begin to increase. But density is not quite the answer. You can see here the Bay Country apartments in Cambridge or the Berlin apartments. They're fairly low, 300,000 per acre, 600,000 per acre. And yes, those units are fairly dense, but what dilutes your value is excess parking and excess lawn space. These are, because in the state of Maryland, you pay your property taxes in 2 forms. You pay taxes on the value of the land, which is a very low account, and then you pay most of it on the value of what is on the land. So if you don't have a lot on your land, you are not receiving very much in property tax revenues. So parking lots bring in almost nothing for local governments, yet they do have huge amounts of infrastructure that need to be maintained. The water and pipe and the sewer that goes around them, even the parking lots being resurfaced, are incredible costs, and they have very little property tax revenues to pay for them. If you look at commercial, this is one of the lower models on the Eastern Shore, the center. Again, most of this is parking. Very little, about half of it is parking, half of it is building that is paying property taxes. Again, examples of low density commercial shopping centers bringing in very low productivity, 500,000, maybe $1 million in Easton and Ocean City. Commercial lots with 2 stories. Again, when you stack your uses, when you stack your density, that's when you see the value. $6.2 million in Stevensville, $7.6 million in Chestertown. And here are some examples right across the street in Salisbury. 3-story commercial, $9.7 million per acre. And some more examples. $5.4 million for 3-story commercial here in Salisbury. Ocean City is when you get to a lot of value. And then the most valuable property we have here on the Eastern Shore is the Monte Carlo at the inlet in Ocean City. And the second most valuable property on the Eastern Shore, the Ross Building, at $49 million per acre, only behind the Monte Carlo. And yes, I understand that this building has a tax abatement, so it's not paying property taxes right now. But everybody knows that when you plant a tree, you are not going to get fruit or shade from that tree for many years. But eventually, this building is going to start paying property tax revenues, and it's going to be paying the bills for the city of Salisbury. So looking at this on a scale, you see low density, again, you dilute your value and you increase your liability because all that infrastructure has to be paid for and maintained. And what most communities on the Eastern Shore, even throughout the state of Maryland, our zoning only allows the lower density types of developments. We've made the higher density, we've made that higher productivity almost illegal to develop. So we are hurting our communities by not allowing these places to be productive. No business has to be 100% profitable all the time. You're allowed to have some losses, but when you only allow this kind of low-density development, you are hurting yourself in the future. You're hurting your local finances. So these are the highest property peak value throughout the Eastern Shore. Again, the Ross Building being the peak property in the city of Salisbury. We also asked Urban 3 to look at a historical analysis of the Eastern Shore, and you can see the image on the left. This is pre-1952, before the Bay Bridge was built, and post-1952. Before 1952, we had only developed 10,000 acres, and those 10,000 acres have an average value of $557,000 per acre. Since 1952, we've developed an additional 163,000 acres at less than half that value. So all that added infrastructure and less than half the value that we'll need to pay for that infrastructure, which is why our roads are crumbling, our water and sewer pipes need to be replaced, and we don't have the funds to maintain them. I'll also point out that the image on the left, these communities were much easier for first responders to respond to calls. Less land for them to have to drive to get to services. Everything was more compact and dense. It was easier to provide services for areas that are more dense. When you start to spread out into the low suburban type of density, you extend those call times. You extend the distance that emergency services have to respond to get to people in need. So now what? Concentrated development is more productive and efficient. Again, this is the peak property tax per acre throughout the Eastern Shore. These are things that we should be modeling and trying to replicate wherever we can. We should try to replicate what we built in the past. Those who came before us knew that this was productive. They may not have known or had the technology to know why it was this productive. They just knew it was productive because this is how humans developed for many, many generations. It is only within the past 70 years that we've been living through this suburban experiment, and now we are beginning to see it sort of crumble around us as we have more infrastructure that needs maintenance, and we don't have the value or the finances to accommodate it. So development patterns matter. Look at what is productive in your community and try and replicate that. This data is available through GIS. I'm happy to give it to the city of Salisbury. We made this open to any jurisdiction on the Eastern Shore that wants us and would like to utilize it. So use your land wisely. Thank you.
Thank you.
So for decades, Salisbury has strive to create a walkable, vibrant, livable downtown. And some would say that has succeeded. Some would say that is struggling. And Salisbury certainly, I think, better today than it was years ago. But it, in many folks' eyes, has a long ways to go. It has many opportunities. It's a great palette for the future. But the challenges that it faces have been faced within the context of your existing zoning. And right now, your zoning is half as dense in the downtown than it was a year ago. So I think the question that Salisbury has to ask itself is, what do you want downtown Salisbury to be? Where are you going to go from here? And if the status quo has achieved what the city of Salisbury wants, know that the zoning is half as dense as the status quo was. If the status quo, meaning a year ago, if you haven't achieved what you want yet, your density is down by almost half. This text amendment makes a by right use available. I think that incentivizes development. It enables people to advance the goal of increasing density, increasing residential activity, increasing activity downtown that will support businesses. The staff report points out challenges. It doesn't point out the positives of increased density, but one thing I want to highlight is it does acknowledge the efforts that Mr. Gillis went through to review every single parcel downtown and look at what is realistically probable in terms of development. And that is, if you took the parcels that are likely to be developed in the next 5 to 10 years, perhaps that gets to 600 units. That's about a third associated with the Salisbury Town Center Apartments, another potential 400 units or so for others. That's over the next 5 to 10 years. This is not immediate. It's certainly something that the city always has the flexibility to deal with in terms of additional procedures or ordinances or changes. But a lot of the negatives in the staff report, which address parking, water and sewer, stormwater management, historic district considerations, those are all baked into your process anyway. Right now, every project that comes in has its parking evaluated on a case-by-case basis. Every project that's proposed, whether it's a density of 4 units per acre or 80, has to go before the Historic District Commission if it's in the Historic District, and it has its architecture reviews. Every project that comes in that proposes redevelopment has to comply with Maryland's much more stringent stormwater management regulations that didn't exist when virtually all of Salisbury was developed. Every project that comes in has to be evaluated from a water and sewer perspective, and the city of Salisbury has to determine whether it can serve that project. If there are upgrades that are required, that would be an upgrade that's required by the developer. Every project that comes in of significant size has to do a traffic study. Those traffic impacts associated with that project would be evaluated. They would be presented to both staff and the Planning Commission. Again, they're also dealt with on a project-by-project basis. So I don't want you to leave with the impression that this is a doubling of density that creates significant problems. All those challenges are challenges that existed before, they exist today. All of those are challenges that have Planning Commission and staff review associated with every single project. And we would be happy to address questions that you have now or questions that come up after the public speaks. Appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, are there questions from the commission members, either to Mr. Ure or to Mr. Showalter? No questions?
I have a couple of questions just about the report, just for clarification. On my version, it's about the 6th page. Item F, it says, under stormwater management, it says, changing code related to the CBD would ideally include provisions that lead to more comprehensive stormwater management for the district. I didn't understand what that means, so maybe a clarification from staff.
Well, quite honestly, I'm not 100% certain myself. I didn't write that paragraph. But I would say this. I don't agree with this statement in whole, because I do believe that any new practices in town, and this is only my opinion, I do believe that any new development are subject to current standards, which are more stringent than standards that were in place when a lot of the existing development was built. So,
Thank you.
I think the line means, it's not written terribly well, comprehensive upgrade requirements, saying that if, in conjunction, as was referenced in a couple other points on a couple other topics, if requirements for even more stringent stormwater management or mitigation were included with this proposal, then things would be better and more well mitigated. So that was the idea.
That's an important clarification, so I appreciate the question.
Mr. Chair, I have one other question just with regard to the staff report. On the 2nd page, there's a map that's given, super useful, of the central business district. It's shown in red.
yes.
I know that one of the things we're going to talk about a lot today is parking, and one clarification I'd like to just get an understanding of to make sure I'm thinking about this correctly. There's some areas of the central business district that have shared use parking. Parking is provided by the city. There's other areas that don't. And in general terms, and just appreciate confirmation of this. The areas to the south of the east prong of the Wicomico, so this would be between Carroll Street and the east prong. I'm not aware of any city lots in those areas, and most of the developed sites there have private on-site parking. So that's one area. And then the second area that I think is in a similar condition is the areas between roughly Riverside Drive and Wicomico River. Most of those lots in that area, to my knowledge, there's no shared city parking. They have parking that's provided on the lots. Is that,
Yeah,
is
that's
that a fair
fair.
statement?
Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
okay. And the reason I bring that up is if you just do a rough estimate of those areas, they represent a little less than half of the entire CBD. So some of the metrics, I think, may be skewed a little bit because we're looking at numbers based on a 77 plus or minus acre CBD. But if we're concerned about parking and concerns about parking, it may be a lot less than that. So I appreciate that clarification. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question as well for staff. So item or point H, when it comes to the environmentally sensitive areas, so and it's mentioned that this proposed development is a part of the critical areas map, and it's in the IDA district, which is true. And I just want to reference again, going to the state website, that the IDA, which stands for Intensely Developed Areas, the law requires that new development and redevelopment include techniques to reduce pollutant loadings associated with stormwater runoff. These techniques include site design, infiltration practices, and structural stormwater treatment practices such as sand filters and swales. And so I want to include here the alternatives. So on such development sites, compliance with the 10% rule may not be possible for these projects. Local jurisdictions may allow alternatives to meeting the requirement on the project site. And it's just, again, they go on to say that that their focus is on improving water quality. And so as a part of this project, did this project have to get any sort of special exception to this rule because it's in the IDA, or is there any concern for the stormwater management or treatment thereof?
I don't want to look at a specific project, but look at it throughout the district.
Yeah.
And I would answer this question the same way I answered to Matt earlier. Current practices, any project will be subject to current practices, both for the state and the city. And I think both are more stringent than were in place years ago when current development that exists now.
And so I guess,
So I would venture to say that things would probably be enhanced,
okay.
in my opinion.
So is there any
My opinion only.
cause for concern to developing on this particular parcel or site because of it lying in this particular area with the critical area map? So again, I'm just referencing.
As long as it complies with state of Maryland regulations and our regulations, I feel that it would be appropriate.
I always do think there is more cause for concern. The more criticality and kind of things that you might be impacting, the more careful you have to be, the more different, as you mentioned, the different regulations, the more you have to comply with, the more you could maybe not comply with, or something could go wrong, I think, the rule, you could say.
I would just ask again because it just says the CBCA IDA is a state Maryland developed mapping resource which identifies sensitive tidal water areas where development may have an outsized environmental impact. So I'm just wondering, is there a cause for concern with the environmental impact for this, since it's mentioned here?
I think when you're near the waters in any type of environmentally sensitive area like this is, then there's always, just by the nature of that, more concern. But as Henry was getting at, I don't think that means you can't possibly develop and you can't follow regulations to develop responsibly. But I think the nature of it is that it would always be more cause for concern.
In addition to that, it says in this portion here that new development within these sensitive areas is generally discouraged. To my understanding, there's three types of development areas within the Chesapeake Bay critical areas, and the IDA is specifically reserved for more urban, dense areas where really the desire is to not hinder development. So it appears to me that sentence isn't accurate.
So I can actually read the first, and that's why I'm glad you mentioned that. Again, intensely developed areas, IDAs, are defined as areas of 20 or more adjacent acres where residential, commercial, and institutional or industrial land uses are prominent. IDAs are areas of concentrated development where little natural habitat occurs. So that's why I was asking you. I was just saying, is there any cause for concern? But this is, it's the state indicates that it's an IDA, so they're saying that typically in these areas there is a lot of development, and it's in commercially lying areas.
I think the word was referencing the CBCA, so that was the logic, more so than the IDA.
Yeah, if I could speak to that, it's also like comparing this sentence is geared towards developing in the IDA, while the best option of the 3 tiers of the critical area, the IDA is less desirable for development than something that is totally removed from the critical area. Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that, Ms. Rodriguez.
Are there other comments or questions? Yes,
I
sir.
have a question. In your slides, you mentioned the center at Salisbury and the parking lot and the value of the building in the parking lot. What would that building be worth if there was no parking whatsoever?
This is just a fraction of the presentation that I wanted to show, just for time's sake. It does show in one example, just a standard shopping center like that, big box store where most of it is parking lot. And I think it shows if you were to add 11 acres of parking, you would decrease the value by 30%. But if you were to remove 11 acres of parking, you would double the value. So if you could, without having the exact numbers on that, if you were to remove the parking there, you could theoretically double or triple the value of that space.
So how would people park to go shopping there if they had no parking lot?
Way that we used to do for many, many years. I mean,
Have you been to the center of Salisbury and see where it's at?
No.
Okay, well, in that case, you don't know how they would get there.
Well, in my community, our farmers market on a Saturday is the time in our downtown where we have the most people, and the farmers market sets up right on the main street, and it removes 50 parking spaces from downtown, and it's a small downtown, but people find a way. They walk, they bike, they carpool, they shuttle.
I bet the folks that own the center would disagree with you.
Probably.
Okay.
Are there other questions?
Yeah, in section M, Henry, there was a sentence that you didn't read. I'd like to read that sentence. There is also the potential loss of community as new residential projects come online with a target market and force out the families and cultural groups that exist currently within the CBD and RRMUD. Could whoever wrote that provide an exclamation there of what you mean?
I did not write it, that's why I excluded it, because I thought it was not a kind comment. And I'm not certain who wrote it.
Okay.
It's a collaborative effort between many people, so.
I mean, what I'm getting from that is that this change could increase property values, and possibly increasing rent, and that a side effect of that might be that, some people might not be able to afford to live downtown. Is that? I'm just looking for an explanation.
That's why I took it out, because it's not.
Okay.
I didn't think it was a proper statement to make,
Okay.
so I excluded it. So,
Are there other comments or questions from anyone?
Given the aspect, I guess, that parking lot 1 was, of course, formerly a surface parking lot, but prior to that, it was developed as a downtown area of some sort, just before my time. How are the utilities in that area? Because of previous development, are the utilities large enough? Would you expect to have to expand them? And how much would you think that the developer might be willing to contribute to something like that?
We have looked at utilities in that area in conjunction to a possible project there. We came up with a number of something order of magnitude around $2 million worth of upgrades that would be needed. It's a lot of very kind of old equipment infrastructure within the streets there. So that's round numbers that we had come up with in terms of developers contributing. I don't think we're at that point of having that discussion.
I understand that. Yeah, part of it would be obsolescence of which you might have.
Yeah, but there could be significant costs there.
Okay.
All right, anyone else? All right, then if there are
Mr.
no-
Chairman, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Yeah, I did. I was trying to find the while you were speaking. So I want to talk to speak to the consumption and it was with the sewer, water and sewer infrastructure. I believe that's item E or a bullet E. So, and I know we mentioned, or it was mentioned here about the station is currently operating at roughly 2/3 capacity with an increase in the increase there. Do we know what the actual capacity of our full water and sewer? I'm trying to remember. I know that Director Corey Cameron, I know she spoke to, and I remember her saying at one point that we were just under or just at about 50% capacity for the whole water and sewer system. And I know you're just speaking to these two mains, but would you know where our whole system
I
is
don't
at?
have that in front of me, but I know we did kind of take a cursory look at that, and it wasn't really close, so we didn't see that these numbers would make a big sea change on that, but
Okay.
I can't address the specific number right now.
Gotcha. Yes.
Just for the record, is the city, for the paragraphs they did not read, do they want to amend the staff report to exclude those paragraphs, or are we keeping them in as submitted?
I'll leave it up to Chip. What is your preference?
No, I think that's your
Okay.
decision. That's
Okay.
the city's decision, I think.
I think it'd be wise to amend them then.
Amend to exclude?
Exclude that sentence and then that paragraph that later on.
Okay, thank you.
Are we clear about the information then that's to be deleted? We do. Okay, very good. Thank you. Other comments or questions? Okay, if not, then we will open the floor to public comment. I'd like to just set some parameters so that we are all on the same page in regard to receiving comments from the public. As we know, there will be quite a few folks that would like to be heard, and we certainly want to give anyone who would like an opportunity to be heard to have that opportunity. As I said earlier, if you plan to testify, we do ask that you sign up on the sheets that are located on the table as you enter the room. We do ask that your comments be focused on the text amendment. And this is particularly important. We're not here today to talk about a specific project. We're here to discuss the text amendment, that is, increasing the density in the CBD from 40 to 80 units per acre. That is the nature of the issue before the commission, not a specific project. I understand that they may be tangentially related, but today the issue is increasing density in the entire CBD. So please focus your comments. Anything you have to say regarding that particular issue, we'll be happy to hear from you. Please come to the podium, if you will, to deliver your remarks. Provide us your name and your place of residence. We ask that you be respectful, please, in the delivery of your comments or concerns. We're glad to hear them. Please be respectful. We may not all agree, but we all are entitled to be treated with dignity and respect. So please provide your comments with respect. You'll be given 3 minutes to provide the comments. At the end of 3 minutes, you may complete your sentence, but you may not continue to provide remarks. There will be a timer on the screen. The staff is going to monitor the time clock for us. You may not come back to the podium a second time to deliver additional remarks. You may not concede any portion of your time to another speaker. You have 3 minutes to provide your comments, and we ask you to do that within the time frame provided. Also, we ask that you refrain from repeating what other speakers have already said. I know that's difficult, but please try to provide new information, new perspectives, new thoughts that you have that maybe others have not already provided. If you've submitted written comments, try to focus your remarks on maybe new information that has not been provided in your earlier written submissions. I want to reiterate, we have a good many people here this afternoon on both sides of the issue. It's certainly the intention of this commission to give everyone who desires to be heard the opportunity to do so. And we will stay as long as we need so that all of you who would like to testify can have that opportunity. Okay, fair enough? All right. Who would like to be first? Yes, if you'll step to the podium, please, provide your name and your place of residence. We'll be happy to hear from you.
Over here?
Yes, sir. Yes.
My name is Mike Morgan. I'm a resident of Salisbury. I've retired here from Chicago, and my wife and I love it here, and we've both very successful and have accumulated a lot of disposable income. But since moving here, we are finding ourselves spending our disposable income elsewhere rather than downtown because there just are not enough places to go for us to spend our money. Not enough restaurants, not enough shops. We are finding our time more spent in Berlin and at the mall. So if the goal is to try to increase the density of the population in downtown Salisbury in order to revitalize the downtown, my opinion is that won't happen. I think people that will move here, if this project were to go forward, will do as my wife and I are doing. We're going elsewhere to spend our disposable income. And so I don't think it will have any benefit at all to the improvement or the revitalization of downtown Salisbury because there just are not enough places for us to spend our play money. We go elsewhere, and I think that's what's going to happen when you add more people to the town. They'll go elsewhere too, and the downtown will not be revitalized. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Mary Hubner, and I live in Salisbury, and I'm going to repeat some of what that gentleman just said. So with the folks who are fighting the developer's plan for luxury apartments just said, okay, we quit, you win, the city loses. I would hope that's not what the developer wants. And if it is, then why are we dealing with them and giving them incentives to boot? This may not be Gillis's city, but it is my city, and I want it to be a winner, not a loser. The city, as this gentleman just said, need businesses and restaurants, galleries, shops that attract people to Salisbury. We lost our only museum thanks to the university. I guess it's easy for the likes of the Chamber and Greater Salisbury Committee to give the go-ahead to Brad Gillis, but isn't it the mission of those of the Chamber and other like groups to attract new businesses? Why should we give incentives to Gillis, and especially why should taxpayers shoulder the burden of it? What am I going to say to my friends if these apartments get built? Just like he said, let's go to Easton to see that new museum. Let's go to Cambridge to go to those galleries and that dress shop I want to go to. How about Berlin and the shops there? They all have free parking, nothing to see here except maybe apartments. I get the feeling that Gillis and other cohorts don't drive around too much. I drive around this area and see lots of apartments, and they all have vacancy signs. High-end apartments downtown don't attract anyone to downtown. Why would anyone come to buy a high-end apartment and live downtown? What's the attraction? Where will all the cars and service vehicles park? If the university builds its entertainment center, will we be parking at the Civic Center and bus downtown? I've never heard anyone say, oh boy, let's go park in a parking garage. And parking garages are not obvious to visitors. I say no to Gillis and the apartments, the density, and yes to doing something good for Salisbury. We need it, and we need it now. Thank you.
Thank you. It could be helpful that if there are a couple of folks who would like to be in line, that will save us a little bit of time, and that could be helpful. So don't hesitate. A couple of folks could get in line. You don't have to have 5 or 6, but a couple would be helpful, and we can keep the comments going. Thank you.
I had
Yes.
to get my kids off the bus, so I gotta go. My name's Stacy Walsh. I work in the old synagogue building, obviously one of the most historic buildings in downtown Salisbury. I do bring my kids to work a lot. I have a lot of bags, and our parking lot is in the plan to be developed, meaning we will have parking. I also want to talk about, you had spoke about the school overcrowding. I don't know if everybody knows, but there's 2 meetings tonight with the school board for Wicomico County because they are doing boundary studies to try and redistrict all the schools because of the overcrowding, specifically my kid's school. There's also 2 petitions out, one obviously for and one against the density increase. Against the density increase has only been out for a week and a half, and we have 419 signatures. The one that is for redoing the density has been out for 3 weeks and has about the same signatures. The documents on record, I just want to be sure everybody knows, with the city, you can go and pull documents. All the letters from the developers, Parker and Associates, the management company, are all stating luxury, but everything that they're telling everybody is the affordable housing. I actually specialize in relocations for a large company in the area. A lot of people come to rent. I would love restaurants, and I don't know if a lot of you know, is that they are opening 3 or 4 new restaurants on Main Street, next to Brick Room, next to Campi, they're opening one. I forget where the other one was. So there is plenty of things that they are developing downtown. So many new businesses are coming. But for me is, I'm not going to go park in a parking garage and walk my butt down to the stores because I have a life and I don't have time for that. And I need convenient parking. And I think it's going to take away business from downtown, to be honest, because nobody wants to go park and then walk a mile to go into a little mom and pop shop that we would love to support. I just want to make sure I said everything that I wanted to. I think that was it. I'll give the rest of my time to the attorney, if you don't mind.
We're not going to concede portions of time to
Oh,
other
okay, I don't know.
persons, but at any rate, thank you for your comments.
My name is Carolyn Wolgamuth. I'm a resident of Salisbury. I strongly oppose this zoning text amendment to double the current density in the CBD to accommodate one developer's proposed apartment project. This text amendment would have far-reaching ramifications as well as unintended consequences to the entire CBD. This developer requested the zoning amendment because he repeatedly failed to secure a density increase through legal means. This is a clear case of one developer who refuses to take no for an answer. The first no was last November when the Salisbury Board of Appeals denied the developer's request for a density exception to build his apartment complex. The second no was in May when Wicomico Circuit Court Judge Jackson dismissed the developer's appeal of the Board of Appeals denial. The third no was in September when Judge Jackson again dismissed the developer's appeal. Rebuffed 3 times, this developer has now resorted to a Hail Mary text amendment to get his way. This is one developer's end run around the legal system. But this zoning amendment would change the rules for everyone. At its last meeting, the commission requested a thorough review that this amendment would have on the CBD. The Director of Infrastructure and Development presented a comprehensive analysis. The resulting staff report addresses a plethora of impacts, including parking, traffic, road infrastructure, water and sewer, stormwater management, schools, emergency services, neighboring areas, historic significance, conflicts with the downtown master plan, and especially cost increase to city taxpayers. I found the staff report's analysis very thorough. Most compelling was their conclusion that, quote, staff cannot support the current text amendment, unquote. This commission should accept DID's staff report recommendation and deny the applicant's request. Doubling density in the entire CBD should not equate to accommodating one developer's project. The burden of proof for this huge density change was on the developer, and he failed. He failed to show why density in the CBD should be doubled, short of the fact that he wants it. If one developer can so easily change the rules to benefit his project, others will surely follow. The municipal code will then lack any meaning or authority. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman DeShields and Board. I really appreciate your time today. I don't envy your position. Thank you for your service to Salisbury. Clearly important to our community. Let's be careful of quoting a staff report that nobody knows who wrote, though. My name is Joey Gilkerson. I'm a developer, an investor, a realtor, an entrepreneur, a philanthropist, and a restaurateur, all in our downtown Salisbury. I'm the Joe of Rody Joe's. I was the co-reviver of the downtown New Year's Eve ball drop. My family donated the gallery building to Salisbury University just to have a stronger presence in our downtown. I've invested and redeveloped a dozen buildings in our downtown. I've spent every working day in downtown Salisbury my entire working life. Let me start by saying I hate putting my opinion out there. I'm not one to often put the dealings of my business and my family out there publicly. However, in this instance, I feel obligated. Salisbury is being suppressed by a small group with a loud voice. Please understand that this voice is not consistent with our community as a whole. And also be concerned that as of this morning, well over 600 people had signed a petition stating the same, consistent with their beliefs. The most basic form of economics is at play here today, supply and demand. When supply is low and demand is high, prices increase. I don't hate landlords, for Pete's sake I am one, but it's no secret that the vast majority of our opposition is in some form related to the landlord community. And considering very few of these people have ties downtown, it becomes obvious that most of our opposition isn't about parking. This isn't about burdening infrastructure. This is about wanting to keep rental supply low and their rents high. I urge this board to see what it is for what it is. So, who supports increasing the density? In short, the experts do. The city is actively working with the outside consultant, Mead and Hunt, to create a comprehensive plan for Salisbury moving forward. Contrary to a few statements today, that plan absolutely positively does focus on increasing density in our core. For the record, we did not hire this company. This is a consultant hired by the city. Previous city administrations had a similar vision and a similar study done in 1999, in 2001, and in 2012, all confirming the same: build dense downtown. The late, great Mayor Paul Martin believed in this, the legendary city planner Pete Cooper believed in this, and it was under the leadership of the late, great Mayor Frank Morris in the 1960s that the city acquired and assembled parcels for the temporary parking lot to make room for a large-scale dense development. The downtown business community at large supports this. The more heads in beds, the better. They've experienced the downtown cycle of businesses opening and closing and recognize that a strong downtown has a community of people that live there. And for those of you wondering, how can a business support losing surface parking? It's because traffic and parking studies with real data have been done. They were done in 1999, in 2007, and most recently in 2023, confirming that our infrastructure can handle it. Desmond is the firm most recently completing the study, and they're a top-tier national firm that specializes in parking consulting. To those not understanding why this density change is needed and why we can't scale our project back to conform to the current code, allow me to leave you with this. Real estate developers are charged with being forward-thinking. We aren't able to solve only the problems that are in front of us today. We are required to think decades and even generations in advance. If we're struggling this hard right now with housing in our community in the year 2024, imagine what it'll be in the year 2044.
Thank you. Thank you very much.